Hey, Lark and Rose here, and I want to suggest that everybody out there do a certain thing while everybody's panicking about the coronavirus, which is write down in a few sentences or so, or record on your phone or whatever, your predictions of what you think is going to happen regarding the coronavirus, both in terms of your guess of the, like, how many people are going to get sick, how far is it going to spread, how fast, how many people are going to die. Again, it's just sort of guesses and predictions, but also about what the government's going to do in terms of authoritarian controls, what effect that's going to have on the economy, and so forth. Now, the goal is not to get everything right because it's sort of a guessing game and there's a whole bunch of variables. The main reason I want people to do this is because in a few months, if you're still alive, you're still going to be alive unless you have a really bad immune system, in which case isolate yourself. But in a few months, I want you to look back on your predictions and then use what you got right and what you got wrong as a reference point for figuring out what to expect from future scares like this, because they're going to happen all over again because they've happened over and over already and will continue to do so. So it's only fair that I do my own prediction. I don't care if people want to guess differently. So in the comment section, if you want to guess this or guess that, be my guest. I don't really care. The point is, when we respond out of fear and we think there might be a risk of this, it's natural for us to think in terms of, well, just in case it really is a threat, we'd better do this and this and this to try to minimize the danger. And to an extent, that's perfectly rational. The trouble is, when we go into fear mode, we tend to lose our rationality and jump onto solutions that are actually worse than the problem if we don't first make sure we understand what the actual problem is, what the probabilities are, what the risks actually are, and all that. Anyway, I'm not going to pretend to know all the statistics and all the facts about coronavirus or to be an expert on it at all. I see what the media is reporting in different places. I also see the facts and figures they're using that are basically meaningless because people don't actually know what they're reporting, and the people who are listening to it don't actually know what it means. The biggest is the mortality rate. I'll throw this out there just for clarity's sake. Talking about a mortality rate right now is kind of pointless because mostly what they're doing is comparing confirmed cases, which is already an unknown because apparently by their own estimates, their false positive results on their tests are just sky high. So even when they test you, they don't freaking know if you have it or not. They sort of have a guess. But let's say they even know. If they go by the number of cases they actually know about and the number of those who die, and they use those two numbers to give a mortality rate, that number is absolutely worthless because it leaves off all the people who have it that they didn't include, that they don't know about. All the people who didn't go get tested, they didn't get checked out, they didn't go to the hospital, they either had no symptoms or they felt like they had a little bit of a flu or a cough or something and they just stayed home and got better. If you don't know how many of those there are, and we don't, nobody does exactly, because by definition they're not going anywhere to create data that can be collected, then trying to guess a mortality rate is just ridiculous. It's like saying, well, I know this one person that had this problem, and I'm going to guess how many other people don't, and then try to extrapolate based on a giant unknown. So when they're talking about mortality rates, that's already a worthless number, and it's actually worthless for half a dozen other reasons too. But anyway, I'm going to get to my guesses. Again, you can have different guesses, or you can have tantrums at me for having my guesses. But what I want you to do this for actually has nothing to do with the coronavirus. It has to do with learning how to predict what's actually going on and what is worth worrying about and what isn't. So here we go. In the long run, which it's not going to be that long in the future, a couple months, if that, we're going to realize that the coronavirus scare, the virus in itself, was not a significant scare. Yes, people with compromised immune systems may be at risk of dying from this. You know how I know that? because they're at risk of dying from almost anything, including the common cold and the flu and a whole bunch of other bugs. And it's bugs, quote unquote, obviously. And it's sad, it's unfortunate. I think one of the focuses that matters most is make sure you're not giving this disease to like someone who's elderly or for some other reason has a compromised immune system. That's already true. If you have the normal flu or a cold or anything else, don't be hanging around and hugging old 90-year-old people who have no immune system. That's just, I hope most people already know that. And that doesn't change at all for this particular thing. So in the not too distant future, we're going to realize that the horrible threat of this was statistically overblown and didn't really matter. That is one of my predictions. Now, there is going to be a bunch of problems that do not have anything to do with the virus itself. They have to do with government responding to the virus. First, I'll give the good news. I think you're supposed to do it the other way around, but I'm going to start with the good news. The good news is, no, it's not going to turn into nationwide martial law. Ever. They don't have the resources to do that. So all those dystopian, scary things about there's police on every corner and there's tanks driving up and down the streets all across the nation, that is not ever going to happen because there aren't the resources to do it, no matter what. And I'm not saying, oh, those in power are so loving and caring, they would never do that to us. If they thought they could, they absolutely would. They can't. They can't come anywhere near that. Every once in a while, they can pile a bunch of resources into one area and do their little fascist Gestapo routine like they did in Boston after the Boston Marathon thing. But that is not something they can do on a large scale. That's not something they can do nationwide at all for 5 freaking minutes, much less on an ongoing basis. No, there won't be martial law. Don't worry about it. And people are already talking about, but there's lockdowns and there's this and there's shelter-in-place orders. Yeah, read the stories about them. It's like shelter in place. Well, unless you have to go to the grocery store or want to go for a walk, take a dog for a walk, or go to the pharmacy or whatever. It's not really a lockdown. It's we really hope you stay at home, and frankly, we aren't really planning on enforcing it because we don't have the resources to do it. Governor of Illinois just came right out and said, you stay at home. Well, unless you have to like go get food or do stuff or go for a walk or whatever. And all the roads are still open. And we're not really enforcing this because we don't really have the resources to do it. Like the cops might sort of do something, but we don't really want to and stuff. It's like this watered down, feeble version because they're admitting they can't do that if they wanted to. So the lockdowns and the stay-at-home orders they're not orders. They're these weird, stupid suggestions. Will some cops go on a power trip? Probably. They do that anyway. But is that going to turn into martial law? Nope, not ever in the U.S. Not ever in the U.S. And it isn't because they're nice. It's because they don't have the resources to do it. And a bunch of pro-freedom people don't understand this. They still imagine that the U.S. government has the resources to make this into a police state utopia or dystopian movie style oppression. They don't have the resources to do that. Even if every single one of their thugs, every single one of their cops, every single one of their soldiers, even if the whole friggin' U.S. military left the rest of the world alone, which the rest of the world would appreciate, and came back here just to oppress us, and even if every single one of their thugs obeyed and would just happily oppress their neighbors, some would and some wouldn't, they still do not have the resources to do that. That is not something you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about coronavirus being some big plague that kills all of us. If you're young and healthy, the likelihood of you dying from it is basically zero. If you have a compromised immune system, be careful, but that's true of all sorts of things, including the flu and everything else. Don't get a bug that may push you over the edge if your system is already very fragile. So, don't worry about the friggin' flu unless you have a system that you need to keep isolated, in which case keep isolated. And other people, be aware of when you're around other people with immune problems and don't give it to them. Like, be kind of aware of what the heck you're doing. Again, that's true even if there wasn't a coronavirus, even if it's just a flu or a cold. That's just what you're supposed to do anyway. So, unless you have immune problems, don't be scared of this stupid flu. Do be scared of giving it to people with crappy immune systems. Don't be scared of national, martial law. Not going to friggin' happen. Now for the bad news. The government is going to make this a complete disaster. And by the way, I do not think this is planned and they're going to intentionally collapse the dollar and do this and declare martial law, blah, blah, blah. This is just going to be a good old-fashioned incompetent catastrophe along the lines of, not quite this bad, but along the lines of the Weimar Republic and Venezuela and all those countries. I think there's like half a dozen in Africa that like hyperinflated their currency and made it a disaster until the currency was worthless. I don't know. I don't think we'll get all the way to that point, but they're going to make it really bad by their solutions. A bunch of their solutions so far are interfering with production, telling everybody to stay home, shutting down businesses, getting a bunch of people fired because, okay, don't go to work. And the businesses are like, well, then you're fired. I can't afford to pay you. When nobody's paying me, I have no customers. They just made me shut down. So the government is just demolishing the economy just with their idiotic orders already. And that's going to have ongoing ramifications. That's not the worst of it. The worst of it is if they follow through on this idiotic commie mentality, we'll give everybody free money, which the economically ignorant are going to cheer for. And in the very short term, if they do it, it's going to look like, yay, we have money, we can pay our bills and stuff. And those who understand monetary policy and the whole fiat fraud will know that in the long run, they didn't give you anything. I'll throw in this quick analogy. If you suppose government said, we're going to make you all rich, what we're going to do is we're going to have official people come to your house and you'll just have cash. You have to take all your cash out of the bank and we'll write another 0 at the end of every bill. It'll be official. We'll have an official stamp to make sure that government did this. So your $10 bills will all be $100 bills and your 20s will all be 200s. And if you have a $100 bill, it'll be 1,000. We'll all be 10 times as rich. Now, I hope instinctively you understand, even if you don't understand economics, that wouldn't do any freaking good. The prices of everything would add another 0 on the end, and there would be no freaking difference, except in the interim when people are trying to figure out, what is this actually worth? Putting extra zeros on pieces of paper doesn't make the world richer. Handing out printed money or borrowed money or stolen money and pushing it around in circles doesn't make anybody richer. What it will do, and this is what you should be concerned about, is make there be a whole bunch of panicked buyouts of things. If a bunch of people suddenly have cash on hand and they all run out and buy stuff, there will be a shortage of goods to buy. And you already see a run on toilet paper because of idiots panicking. Look, people, we're not pooping any more than we were last week, and it's not any more difficult to make toilet paper than it was last week. The only reason there's a run on it is because people are like, oh my gosh, they're going to run out. We have to go get some. They could do that with anything. If people are suddenly panicked and they all run out and buy a whole bunch of something because they think it's not going to be there, they make it come true. They make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you're handing out cash and people go, now I'm suddenly rich, they go buy a bunch of stuff and they buy out the shelves and you start to see a little version of what we see in communist country with empty shelves all over the friggin' place. But that's not the biggest problem either. The biggest problem is when they throw in, if they're talking about $1,000 or $2,000 to like every adult or household, first of all, it's going to be a catastrophe for them to even try that, and the most unfair, botched up administrative nightmare you can imagine. But let's say they actually do it, that everybody gets $1,000. Yay, hurrah. The value of the dollar is absolutely going to plummet. It may take a while for it to catch up because that's how inflation works. You dump stuff in and prices have to sort of adjust, and there's this big unstable mess in between. In the long run, the end result is that it harms everybody. Some people more than others, but it's going to harm everybody. And it may pretty much take down the dollar to a point where nobody wants it and the global economy stops giving a crap about stupid U.S. Federal Reserve notes. In the meantime, there's going to be a lot of hardship in the U.S. economy as a result of government solutions to an almost non-existent problem. I mean, it is a problem of, overwhelming the healthcare system if a whole bunch of people get this mostly not that serious sickness, but if a whole bunch of people will get it, first of all, some of them are going to have compromised immune systems and actually be at risk of dying, and some of them are going to actually need like ventilator treatment. And if that happens to a whole bunch of people at once, yes, you can overburden the system, and so there is a reason to flatten the curve as they're talking about. That isn't the dumbest thing in the world. The dumbest thing in the world is for young people to think we're all going to die from this. No, you're freaking not. And in a couple months, we're all going to know. No, you're freaking not. And it's just going away. But the economic ramifications of government solutions, giving away free money and forcibly interfering with the economy, shutting down restaurants, shutting down this, interfering with this, that, and the other thing, is going to have long-term disastrous results. And the worst results will be the most long-term, which is if they hand out free money to everybody. And by the way, if you're a Trumpite and you actually believed him saying this will never be a socialist nation, do you know what it's called when he suggests what Trump does and what Yang did and what Democrats and Republicans are now all doing, which is let's have government give free money to everybody? That's called socialism, you jackasses. And there's a reason we don't want it. And there's a reason that Trump is a freaking socialist, if you would pay attention, just like all the other establishment crooks there that are proposing the same disastrous solutions. So yes, those are probably going to be pretty damn bad, unless they botch it up so bad they fail to even administer it. That's the best case scenario, is it's such a bureaucratic botch up that they can't even actually make it work, which I have some hope for that just because government is so damn incompetent. But so there is something to worry about. It's not martial law. It's not the virus, unless you actually have pre-existing health conditions. But we are going to see in the future, again, this is all my predictions. I don't care if you agree with me. I care if you write down your predictions and go look at them after the fact and use that as a gauge for the next time around when they're scaring us with something else to see, well, maybe I don't need to be immediately terrified of everything the government says. Be scared of this. So let me give you some very good advice about staying safe. Drive carefully. Nothing to do with the coronavirus. The number of people who died since I started recording this video is more than the number of people who have died in the country from coronavirus yet. Drive carefully, please, because it's an actual statistically significant threat to everybody. If you have a crappy immune system, avoid people who have bugs, flus, whatever else. Bugs, again, in quotes. If you're anybody else, drive carefully and eat less crap and go for a walk, get some exercise. Oh, and don't freaking worry, because stress is very bad for your immune system, and worrying about alarmist fear-mongering crap coming off of the TV is very bad for your stress levels and your immune system. So many people are worried about all of the wrong things and ignoring all of the other wrong things. And so those are my predictions, and it's going to be bad, and it's going to have nothing to do with coronavirus. It's going to have to do with authoritarianism and economic ignorance and a long-term catastrophe caused by politicians who want to look like they care and they're helping. And no, they don't, and no, they're not. And we're going to see that very clearly in the next couple of months. So hang in there. Do what you have to keep yourself alive and healthy and everything else. And do write down your predictions and then use that as a gauge to see next time they do this, whether you really need to be that overly cautious and overly aware and overly paranoid about whatever the next crisis is that they tell you to be scared of.